the uniforms, his uniform and my uniform, this fella was still at sea in the Navy until February of 46. And we got out of service in 45.
Oh, okay.
Anyway. Can you take a, oh,
I already took a
well, we ran a copy of it, but can you take a picture?
Yeah, I already took a picture.
Okay.
I already did, yeah.
Brother Bill was captain in the Air Corps. And at this point, after the war, he's 27. This brother's in the Navy, was assigned to a ship that wasn't finished. And by the time they finished it and took it out and brought it back to have things fixed on it, they went through the Panama Canal and the war was over. The Japanese war was over when they got into the Pacific. And so he was in charge of 5 landing craft to land on the beach. You know, and I don't know how much you really know of World War II, but Japan was a terrible place to fight. The Japanese didn't want to give up. And if you got captured there, you were in real trouble. I got captured in Germany and saved my life. Anyway, had they not dropped the atom bomb, the Japanese would still be fighting us. I mean, they were going to have to land troops and all, lose a lot of people. And so the atom bomb really was a big favor for me. Anyway, I was in the infantry and was captured the first day of the Battle of the Bulge, where the Germans attacked our troops. And I spent 4 months as a prisoner and 8 months in rehab to get over it. I lost 30 pounds at the time, and I haven't really seen any bad effects about it. I was 21 years old. I'm 94. Wow. Fortunately, you can see that we were all rather tall. This one is as nearly as tall as I am, but huskier than I, wider. This one was stocky. He could have played football, but he didn't. But I was tall and skinny. That's just the way you come.
Yeah.
And so haven't had any problem. I'm not even sure what you know of World War II.
Well, I don't really know.
I was a senior in high school when Pearl Harbor happened. That was 41. I finished high school in 42 in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Started college. Turned 18. And I'm going to get drafted and wind up in the infantry. So I joined the Army Reserve with the understanding that I would stay in college 4 months, 4 years, take ROTC, and upon graduation be a second lieutenant and then serve a couple of years. That was my understanding. Well, before finals of the second semester, they called the reserves up. And fortunately, there were so many people in school, in what was Oklahoma A&M at the time, that they couldn't give us finals. It was about 10 days before finals started. They gave us a grade without taking the final exam. And I'm in engineering, and I had chemistry 2 and physics 2, and I don't remember what the math course was, but especially chemistry was tough for me. And I got a B. Didn't deserve a B. A friend of mine's wife was a lab instructor, and I got a B without taking a final.
Wow.
And came back 2.5 years later and finished college. When people hear that I had been in the infantry, they at first assume, as they say, were you in the D-Day landings, which was across the channel from England, where they landed in France? And I said, no, on D-Day. I was in a military hospital in Paris, Texas. I was in training at Camp Maxey, Paris, Texas, with live ammunition, and was in an accident where mortar fire landed on top of us and killed one, put me in the hospital.
Yeah.
But that's where I was when D-Day occurred in Europe. Anyway, we went to Europe in September of '44. And my brother, who was in the Air Corps, had been there 2 years with B-17s. And he found me. Now, how do you find, you didn't have internet in those days. He'd been in England, southern England, for 2 years with the B-17s. Was a ground officer. He didn't fly. Maintenance of B-17s. He found out where my division was. Now, a division is 15,000 people. He was able to find my company, which is 150 people, and showed up in a Jeep at my company headquarters and talked to First Sergeant into calling me up. When I got word that I was to see the First Sergeant, it's like going to see the principal. You've done something wrong.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out what I'd done wrong. And here's my brother, as a captain in the Air Corps. He has gotten me a 3-hour pass, and he's in a Jeep. And we ride to a grass airfield, a Spitfire airfield, and here's a B-17 and a pilot sitting there. Now, my brother's just a ground officer. He doesn't fly. Anyway, we take off in the B-17, circle around a little bit. Now, I'd never been in an airplane before. When we land, he takes me back to my division. It is October the 28th, 1944. I'm 20 years old. That's my 20th birthday. My brother is 6 years older than I. And according to Mother, he was going to take care of me. When he was in the 6th grade, I was starting kindergarten. And he told Mother, he says, I'm not taking that squalling kid to school again. I apparently didn't want to go to school. Anyway, later on, I got captured by the Germans, spent 4 months in Germany, POW camps, and wound up back in southern England. And he visited me. I don't know how he found where I was. And the European war is over. He says, I'm going back to the States any day now. And I said, well, I hope I do too. I'm hospital care from malnutrition. And he flies back in a B-17. I fly back on a DC-6. Now, these are all prop planes. They can only go so far. Flew from Scotland to Iceland to Newfoundland to New York. Filled up with gas, each time. And we arrived back in Stillwater. He gets there on a Saturday. I get there on a Sunday. And the whole family from Bartlesville, which is where we're from originally, is there talking to Billy about the war and having seen me, how is he? And then I show up. Anyway, it's quite a story. During service, you could hitchhike, especially in the summertime when you're wearing suntans, very little outfit. My folks lived in Stillwater, Oklahoma, but my mother's sister and my grandmother lived in Clay Center, Kansas. Without telling them, I just hitchhiked up, see if I could find them, and I'm on the outskirts of Clay Center. They're farmers. And I'm standing there with my thumb out, and the fellow stops and says, where are you going? I said, well, do you know my uncle, Oscar Sewell? Yeah, I know right where he lives. He says, I'll take you right there. And he dropped me off right at my aunt and uncle's place, and my grandmother's there. Yeah. This is while I'm on rehab after a POW time. And it was easy to hitchhike different places. I'm a poor example of training somebody to fight a war and then giving up. Trump would put me in prison probably for telling the story. He thinks that if you train, you ought to do your job. And me, I gave up. But we were housed in Belgium in the ground, a hole in the ground with logs across it, dirt across it, and snow across that. And it's November and December of '44. And the Germans came through, didn't hit where we were, and the first sergeant got everybody together and says, we've lost contact with L Company, we were I Company. We've got to make contact with them. And Cliff pointed at me, he says, you're first scout, my buddy's second scout. Go that way and we'll follow you. And Cliff, get that rifle off your shoulder. There are Germans around here. Well, I carried a rifle on a strap, easy way to carry it. I didn't know there were Germans around here. I mean, everything has happened. I didn't know it. They hit the company next to us, didn't hit us. And so I led a squad. They killed my buddy and were fixing to kill me when I gave up, because the squad that was following me wasn't there anymore. The only person firing from my side was me. And so I gave up. Anyway, 4 months later, I'm liberated and came home the hospital route and actually spent 8 months rehab, getting over 4 months of being a prisoner. Best thing that ever happened to me. Other people were shot at and killed after I was captured, and I had it easy, except for the fact that I didn't have enough food. I only weighed 140 pounds when I was captured. I weighed 110 pounds 4 months later. So I came home hospital route. I'm in good shape here. This is after being a POW. I don't know how long I'm going to live. I'm 94. And I got a new pulmonologist. I had a pulmonologist at Doctors Hospital. Doctors Hospital changed hands twice in 1 year. And the pulmonologists decided to go out of business. They would only see patients at the hospital, wouldn't have an office anymore. So I had to get a new pulmonologist. And they got me one at Baylor. And I went to see him, and he says, you don't have COPD, which they were treating. I've been treating for 3 years. And so they took me off all this medication. And he gave me 10 more years. And he said, I got good news and bad news. And I said, what's the good news? He says, you got 10 more years. Here I am, 94. I said, what's the bad news? He said, same thing. You got 10 more years. You know, I've been here 4. I'm going to be here another 10. Any way to shorten that? Seeing your Texas A&M shirt, I interviewed Texas Instruments in '55. I lived in Tulsa at the time, and heard about TI and got a plane ride to Love Field and was interviewed and then introduced to a lot of people, like I was a new graduate. I'd been out of school 6 years. And they said, where'd you go to school? I said, A&M. I had been at Oklahoma A&M, Stillwater. And I got some funny looks when I said A&M. So I learned to say Oklahoma A&M. Of course, then they changed the name to Oklahoma State. Oh, got rid of that bad A&M idea. You in the Corps?
No.
No. Well, I'm anti-war, anti-guns. My youngest son, when he turned 16, was given a shotgun by his grandfather. I said, you'll have to keep your shotgun at your grandfather's house. You can't keep it at our house. I'm anti-NRA. Who needs a shotgun to shoot a squirrel? You know, you have nothing left. Yeah. Anyway, I have taken the Veterans Administration for all that they will give me. You know, the train station that's here, White Rock train station, is the blue line. It goes past the VA Medical Center down South Dallas. And so when I go there, I just get on the train, straight down, 2.5, half price for us seniors. And because I was a POW, I have a top rating with the VA, and they supply any medication that I use. And so it's been good. Ask me some questions.
Okay.
Now wait a minute. Let me get my microphone out.
Okay.
I'm real deaf, and this is the best I can do. Okay.
Okay. Where and when were you born?
Bartlesville, Oklahoma, in 1924. Is that close enough?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. What do you know about your family name?
About my family name. Yeah. Okay. My grandfather, Clift, came from England to the U.S. when he was 21 years old. He wrote his life story when he was, 85 or something. He was interviewed by one of his son's secretaries when he was 85, lived to 90, and gave his life story of how he and 2 boys that were 21 came to the U.S. to, land in England was terrible. I mean, he was the 3rd son in a family, and the first son gets everything. The second son, I finally found the second son was in Australia. He had gone there. Anyway, he came to the U.S. and wound up in Nebraska, and it's cold in Nebraska. Anyway, they moved to Oklahoma in '09. They had 4 boys and 2 girls. The 2 girls were school teachers, never married, never had children. The 4 boys sired 8 children. I don't have a copy of that. Anyway, I went to TI in 55. Then they transferred me to Houston in 56, where one of my dad's brothers, my uncle, lived, and he was an oil man, Texas oil man, you know. That's what you do in Texas.
Yeah.
He bought mineral rights and oil leases west of Houston, when east of Houston was the going place. And he ran out of money. He couldn't do anymore. Just then, West Texas hit big, and he became a multimillionaire. Anyway, he had a daughter who was my age, but she wanted to be an actress and was in New York trying to make it as an actress. When I moved to Houston, and here I had 3 children, and they were 7, 6, and 3. And so he treated them like his children, his grandchildren, because his daughter wasn't married. Anyway, he would take us to the Petroleum Club at the top of Exxon building on Sunday to have breakfast. And the children just loved it, you know. Anyway, he died about 5 years later, had a heart attack. In fact, I had been at the hospital and I signed his death certificate because his daughter was in New York and his wife was just incapacitated with his death. Anyway, when he died, the children didn't have this rich uncle to play with anymore. And that was kind of the last of that. Well, his daughter, Jeanette, inherited all his money, and his wife died 3 or 4 years later. And the daughter had all these millions of dollars. And do you know Houston at all?
Houston, yes.
Post Oak and Westheimer is an expensive ground. Anyway, Jeanette bought 1/4 of that intersection and built a religious theater there, because that's what she does. She writes religious stuff and hires other people to act in things, whether it works or not. And she's my age. And she died last year, never having had children, and had not written a will. Now, you know what Texas does? They have rules. And they wanted a family tree of Jeanette. Well, there were 7 of us besides Jeanette. And so I inherit 1/7 of what Jeanette had left over. Now, it's still going through the courts. J.P. Morgan is running things. But you know, the lawyers, so much an hour, there won't be any money left by the time we get to it. But I get 1/7 of what she left. I was about to run out of money anyway. I have a son in New York who is my power of attorney. I was talking with him. I says, "How's my money doing?" And he says, "You're all right. You'll be all right next year." But he says, in 2020, it's going to be kind of close. Well, he doesn't want me to spend money doing things. He's kind of tight-fisted. Because when my money runs out, you know whose money I use? His.
Yeah.
Anyway, this problem is probably solved by these millions of dollars that are left over. More questions.
What jobs have you had?
Huh?
What jobs have you had?
Oh, well, out of college, the only offer I had was Pratt & Whitney Aircraft in Hartford, Connecticut, which I took. Only thing was, I was an Oklahoma hick, and I didn't understand even the bus drivers in Hartford, Connecticut. I couldn't understand what they said. They couldn't understand what I said. I stayed 3 months, came back, found work in Tulsa, and worked 6 years in Tulsa before moving to TI. And I spent 18 years in Houston. And anyway, found a job, was offered a job in Dayton, Ohio. And looked like the kind of work that I wanted. I was a mechanical engineer. I didn't know that they had snow in Dayton, Ohio. I'd been in Houston 18 years. You know, I'd lost track of things. But Dayton, I hadn't seen snow since I had been in Germany. Anyway, I spent a year in Dayton and then moved back to Dallas. Been here 30, 40 years now.
Okay. Are there any traditional first names or nicknames in your family?
Well, I'll tell the story. This brother was named for his grandfathers, William Clift and William Dunaway were his two grandfathers. So he's William Dunaway Clift. This brother was named for his two grandmothers. Now, he would have been Nancy Nellie, except that they used the maiden names. He is Whirl Small Clift. So he's Whirl. That is my grandmother Clift's maiden name. Nancy Small was my grandmother Dunaway's maiden name. Anyway, so those names came up. So when I was born, I'm the baby. I'm a junior. They couldn't think of a name for me, so I'm Gilbert Jr. My father's Gilbert Sr. Now, nobody knows me as Gilbert in the family. This brother is 20 months older, but only 1 year ahead of me in school. His birthday was in February and mine October, and January the 1st was the division for schooling. So he's only 1 year ahead of me in schooling, and so he's close to me. He couldn't say Gilbert. He's 20 months old when I'm born. He's Galbert. Well, it wound up Gobby, and that's the family name that I have is Gobby. Nobody around here knows that.
Okay, next question. What languages do you speak?
When I was divorced after 29 years of marriage, and I said, what haven't I done that I would have done if I hadn't been married, raising children? Well, I hadn't been in the Peace Corps, so I applied to the Peace Corps, and they set me up with a job in Sierra Leone, which is on the hump of Africa, and I would learn Swahili. Anyway, Zaire, which is a country near Sierra Leone, was having military problems, and they moved all the Peace Corps people from Zaire to Sierra Leone and took my job. So I didn't go to Zaire. It's a good thing I didn't, because Swahili is hard to learn, and I didn't know that I had a hearing problem at this point. Anyway, they said, don't worry, we have a place for you. We'll send you to Honduras as a civil engineer. And I said, I'm not a civil engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer. Well, that's all right. We have a civil engineer with the Montana Highway Department has been with the Highway Department 20 years. He's going to be assigned to the same city that you are, so you just work with him. You won't have a problem as civil engineer. Well, we arrived in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, to take language training. And I was tested, and I'm a 0. I hadn't had Spanish in high school. I didn't know that I had a hearing loss at this point. Anyway, this Montana highway guy tested a 0. And we had one teacher that only spoke Spanish. And we had 2 other students. So there were 4 of us students with this one teacher. And after 2 weeks, 2 of the fellows that were in our group were moved to another group. They were apparently 1s, not 0s. And this Montana guy and I had the teacher by ourselves. Well, after 2 more weeks, he and his wife went back to Montana and left me with the job. Anyway, I made do for a year, but I signed up for 2 years, but only stayed a year. But every night I would go to a movie that was English sound and Spanish subtitles. I could read Spanish, but I could not speak it. And I learned later that I had a hearing problem and started having hearing aids. And now I'm down to the point where this is a microphone that talks to my hearing aids. I'm pretty well stone deaf.
Okay. Are there traditions that you have given up or changed?
That I wish would change?
Yeah, like traditions that you changed or that you gave up?
Well, I'd like to change the rules on AK-47s. There's no reason for AK-47s to be legal in the United States. It's used for war between peoples, and we don't have a war in the United States, and it shouldn't be a legal instrument. I am very anti-war, anti-gun. There's got to be a better way to settle things than going to war, atom bombs and whatnot. Of course, I don't know how to do that, but I can't think of. Well, I'm anti-Trump. I'll just tell you that right off. Having been a POW, I would not meet Trump's standards as an American. You know, he doesn't even approve of McLean, who was prisoner in Korea for 5 years. You sure ought to be able to do something better. Anyway, I didn't, when it was Hillary or Trump, I didn't want to vote for either one. So I voted for the vice president. Hillary's vice president was bilingual and had been in the Peace Corps. So I voted for her side, of course, lost out. I'm assuming that Trump probably will be in for 8 years. Anyway, my son is a Trump man, so we don't talk politics. I don't know.
Okay, next question. What stories have you come down to you about your parents or grandparents?
Well, my grandfather Clift was the 3rd son in the family in England. the first son, according to tradition, the first son gets the farm. It took me a long time to find where the second son was. He was in Australia. And the third son, my grandfather, came to the U.S. when he was 21 years old because there was land. You know, he wound up in Nebraska and raised wheat and finally moved to Oklahoma where it was a little warmer. And really, that's the only stories of grandparents that I had. My grandmother, Clift, died while I was young. I don't have any memory of that. My mother's mother, I knew real well. And she was from Maine. And her husband, my mother's father, I didn't know very well because I was probably 10 years old when he died. So don't have anything from that. In the old days, the children took care of their parents when they get to be my age. And my grandfather was taken care of by his old maid daughter. And I had something I was going to go with that in it. Anyway, nowadays, you move to a place like this, and my son pays the bills. He's my power of attorney. And I have quit driving as of March the 1st. It's just too much of a hassle. Insurance for me was bad, my age. So I quit driving. What was the question again?
What stories have you come down to you about your parents and grandparents?
My grandfather went back to England twice in his lifetime to see his parents. But my grandmother would never go with him. She didn't want to get on a ship. So she'd go to California and visit some of the children who were out in California. But my grandfather dictated his life story. He lived to 90. At 85, he dictated his life story to one of his son's secretaries. And he had done real well as a farmer. And the fact that he lasted till age 90, and then my father lived to 97. So see, I'm only 94, so I've got a ways to go to catch even my father. But recently, I had a doctor tell me I'm good for another 10 years. That's bad. My grandfather had an English accent, never lost his English accent. I was 13 years old when he was being cared for by his daughter, and she needed a vacation, so Grandpa came to stay with us for 2 weeks. And I was 13, so I was his guide around town. And Stillwater, Oklahoma A&M, was building a new basketball stadium, which if you know, T. Boone Pickens has built the stadium, the football stadium. It's round, but at one end is this big building that is the basketball building, which was built when I was 13 years old. Anyway, my grandfather wanted to go, he liked to watch them eat rivets. And I said, what? I want to see them eat rivets. Heat rivets. He put H's on things and took H's off of things. In order to care for him at our house, Mother gave him the front bedroom. And there's a window right by the bed. And she says, is there anything you need? And he says, there's too much hair on my head. What he was saying, there's too much air on my head. You see too much air on my head. Anyway, so I knew my grandfather Clift better than anybody. My grandmother Dunaway, my grandfather died at 90 in 1945 while we were all in the service. But my grandmother Dunaway was a little younger, apparently, and lived in Kansas. And while I was on rehab, getting over being a POW, I hitchhiked to Clay Center, Kansas, and had my thumb out to get a ride, and the fellow stopped and says, where are you going? And I said, well, I want to go to my Uncle Otto Sewell's farm. His wife is my mother's sister. He says, I know right where it is. I'll drop you off there. All right. So he dropped me off at Uncle Otto's farm, and my grandmother was living there. I mean, my aunt had married late in life this fellow that she had known years ago. His wife had died, and so and my grandmother lived on the farm with him, which surprised me. But I don't remember at what age she died. Don't remember that. On the GI Bill, which I was when I went back to school, I took the ground school for flying. And during the semester that I was doing this, I soloed. And then the semester changed, and I had a heavy load, and I couldn't get out to the airport to take more flying, so that's where my flying abilities ended. Well, I hadn't realized that my son was caught up by my flying stories, and he took flying lessons from the father of a girlfriend of his sister's. Anyway, he learned to fly and sort of took my place for flying. It's strange that I didn't manage to go ahead with it, but he did. When he was 16 years old, he rented a plane from the Longhorn Flying Club. Now, he had never been to University of Texas, but somehow he was a member of the Longhorn Flying Club. And he rented a Cessna 150, I think it is, two-place plane. Flew from Austin to Montreal, Canada, Expo 67. He went up there, a friend of his went with him. Two 16-year-olds, over 6 feet tall, went to Montreal. And on the way back, he was headed for Logan Field at Boston. Only it was covered by clouds. and he didn't have a license to fly through clouds. So he radioed Logan Field and told him the problem, and they talked him down to land at Logan Field. So he's had quite a bit of experience that way. Anything else?
Yeah. How did your parents or grandparents and how did your parents come to meet and marry?
Oh, that's an easy one. My mother was a graduate from Kansas University. Graduated in 1913. My father went to Oklahoma Baptist College in Blackwell, Oklahoma, and graduated in 1913. They accepted jobs in Dewey, Oklahoma, Dewey High School, for the fall term of 1913. And here they meet, their first job's teaching. And Mother lived in Bartlesville, which was an interurban ride to Dewey, something like 20 miles. But she lived in Bartlesville because she had two sisters that lived in Bartlesville. She lived in Bartlesville and each day rode the interurban to Dewey to teach. My father lived in Dewey, but he took the interurban wooing Mother and made sure that he caught the last interurban back to Dewey at night, because otherwise he'd be stuck. Anyway, he was a coach and history teacher. Mother was a Latin and German teacher. My dad became a principal of the school and then became the principal at Bartlesville, which was a bigger place, and then was superintendent of schools in Bartlesville when I was born in 24. Now, they had started teaching in 1913. So 11 years later, when I was born, he was superintendent of schools. By the time I was 1 year old, he was no longer in the school business, was selling furniture. He said it was too political. They had contracted for a new gymnasium for a junior high or a high school, I'm not sure which, and it ran over budget, and he got blamed for it. And he said, school's too political, and quit school business and went to sell furniture. Never knew how come he chose furniture. Anyway, he had done well and had saved his money, and he bought into the K&Car furniture store in Newkirk, Oklahoma, which is a little dusty town. He put in a new store, a branch of K&Car, in Winfield, Kansas, which was a little bit better town, and sold furniture there. He showed his brother, for some, I don't know what, he'd been a school, not a superintendent, but, well, anyway, the brother wanted to learn the furniture business, so my dad helped him and took him to Chicago to the furniture market and helped him buy furniture, and he set up a furniture store in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Now, my dad said it's a dusty little hick town, Stillwater, in 33. 33 dust storms and everything was a little hick town in that time. By 36, my dad realized what a good store his brother had in Stillwater and made a deal with his brother, and we moved to Stillwater, and he and his brother were co-owners of the furniture store the rest of his life. Made good money, died at 97 with money left over. You know, I didn't have a whole lot of money left over. I didn't do as good controlling money as my dad did. But when my dad died in a Presbyterian place like this, but a Presbyterian place in Ark City, Kansas, he was to be buried in Blackwell, Oklahoma. And we followed the hearse as it drove from Winfield, Kansas to Blackwell, Oklahoma. And on this drive, a dust storm came up, and we thought that strange that here he had lived through the dust storms of 30. And at the time of his death, he was transported through a dust storm. My grandfather was an Englishman and always thought that Englishmen were good, honest salesmen. And in Blackwell, Oklahoma, where they lived, an Englishman was selling crypts in the IOOF mausoleum. Now, some odd fellows, I really don't know what they are, but anyway, the salesman was English, and my grandfather had the money, and he brought 12 crypts in this mausoleum. Well, he and his wife are buried there, and many of the children, my mother, my father, are buried there. I don't remember my mother's internment. I was there, but I don't remember anything about it. But my father, I helped slide my father's casket into this niche, and then they put marble against it and his name on it. But my grandfather had bought these 12 crisps because he was an Englishman that sold it.
Okay. What are some of your childhood memories? Some of your childhood memories.
I have lost a lot of the early days. I don't have any names of people from my World War II experience. I just lost everything. And childhood experiences, really, it's only from somebody else telling me about what happened there that I might remember something, but my memory is leaving.
Do you have any memories of the Great Depression?
My dad sold furniture. And if people didn't buy furniture, he didn't sell furniture. My brother, this one, and I got braces put on our teeth. This is in Kansas, would have been in 35 to 36. We got braces put on our teeth by the dentist, got some furniture, and we got braces. It was barter. Neither one of them had any money. And he just traded their what they had in the way of business. But we didn't suffer from the Depression of the 30s. The kids who went to school with us that carried a bucket came by bus or some way to school with a bucket. The school didn't have a cafeteria. They carried a bucket and ate from that. Wound up millionaires because they inherited their farm from their parents, and the farms were worth a lot of money. Mm-hmm. So these kids that carried buckets were all millionaires. This brother had a girlfriend in Winfield, Kansas. And now we had moved to Stillwater, but he still had his girlfriend in Winfield. And he went to Great Lakes something in Chicago to take the training to be an ensign. And his girlfriend and my mother went to Chicago to pin the emblems on one on this shoulder and one on this shoulder. Anyway, my mother and his girlfriend. Well, he's now an ensign, and he is sent to Florida to train on these landing crafts. And he arranges with his girlfriend, he's kept track of her all this time, the girlfriend and her best girlfriend took the train from Kansas to Florida for them to get married. He's a brand new ensign, and they did the cross sabers and whatnot, and were married in Florida. And in fact, his first child was born 2 weeks before he got out of the Navy. He was late getting back in 46. Okay.
Okay. How are holidays traditionally celebrated in your family?
Celebrations?
Yeah, holidays. Any holiday? Any holidays they celebrate?
Well, I'm not thinking of holidays at this point. Every other year, at Father's Day weekend, which is June, the first Sunday of June, or there's some right around then, we have a family reunion at the Dixie Dude Ranch at Bandera, Texas. There are horses to ride, swimming pool. Anyway, that's my generation now. Both these brothers, well, in fact, this brother found the Dixie Dude place. We had taken a couple of reunions in Oklahoma, in Oklahoma parks, but we were needing something better, and he and his wife found the Dixie Dude, and we've been there for 20 years, I guess, so it'd be 10 times. It's every other Father's Day weekend. And the thing is, I'm the senior member of the family reunion now. I'm older than anybody. I used to be the baby of the family. And now I'm the senior member. I did had 3 students from Eastfield make a DVD of my story 2-3 years ago, and anyway, I took it to the family reunion, and then they made copies of it. They liked it. And I don't know how much longer the reunions are going to go, because all the older ones have died off. Now, the place has attraction because it has a swimming pool and the horses. But it has changed over the 20 years we've been going, and I can see at some point somebody's going to say, well, let's not have reunions anymore. And as far as Thanksgiving and Christmas, I have a niece here in Dallas that used to be in Tulsa, that's just moved here because they have a son that lives here in Dallas. So I'm invited to Thanksgiving, usually with them. Christmas, I wind up going to New York to be with my son up there. And, Southwest flies to, what's the name of the airport in New York? LaGuardia, the old LaGuardia. They've improved the airport some, but of course it flies from Love Field, which is handy. Try to go to a Broadway play while I'm up there at Christmas, depending on what they've arranged. My daughter-in-law is from TCU, Fort Worth. This was a high school girlfriend of my son's. He went to MIT in Boston. We lived in Houston. He went to MIT, and his girlfriend went to TCU. Well, 5-6 years later, I get an invitation to a wedding of Tebby and a veterinarian, and I go to the wedding. And then 3 or 4 years later, one of Joe's high school friends says, hey, Tebby's back on the market. She's gotten a divorce. Well, he looks her up, and as it turns out, she can't have children. I don't know what the problem is, but apparently the veterinarian wanted to have children. No, just divorce her, marry somebody else. Tebby's available. So Joe manages to marry her and move her from, you know where Seguin is?
I don't.
Well, Seguin is between here and College Station. She has a house in Seguin that they rent out. Anyway, he's proposing marriage and moving her to New York. And she says, I've got 2 daughters. I've got 2 girls. No, he said, no, I didn't know that. And she says, they each have 4 feet. She has 2 dogs. They moved 2 dogs to New York. He has an apartment in New York that's under rent control, Anyway, they found that there is an elderly lady on their floor that loves the dogs and and dog sits for them. Of course, dogs don't last, 12, 13 years. dogs are gone. Anyway, they're long gone. But you know what a home demonstration agent is out of Texas A&M? They teach people how to count calories and how to cook and things like that. Now, she was a home demonstration agent for Texas A&M, although she went to TCU. When they married, well, she has the same kind of job in New York. It's not Colgate, it's, what's another college with a C up in New York? Anyway, her office is in Queens. They live in Manhattan, and she rides the subway to Queens every day. She's now high up in she isn't a home demonstration agent, but she has other people that are. She's 68, so she'll be retiring one of these days, maybe. Anyway, she likes the job. What else?
What special food traditions do your family have? Is there any like special food traditions in your family?
Traditions.
Yes, in food.
I can't think. My brain has quit. Now, other than every other year, the reunion, that's the only tradition I can think of offhand. We don't really do, well, we do Christmas and Thanksgiving of some sort or other, but not real traditions.
Okay.
You know how much it's rained here. Well, in Seguin, the house